Swales, When Burnout Becomes Reality podcast creator, producer, host, everything really. A podcast that was born out of my own lived experience of burnout and my desire to connect with people who were or are going through or have gone through burnout and share my own experience. And it's evolved from there to also having guests come on the show and for me to share professional wisdom as to how to navigate this thing we call burnout to help prevent, recover, and really transform and evolve so we don't get burnt out again. So this is When Burnout Becomes Reality podcast. Please note that whilst my guests, some of us work in the burnout field and we are coaches, counselors, therapists in this space, that the information we do provide, the wisdom that we do share, cannot be tailored to meet your personal needs and should not be a replacement of going out there and getting personalized help and support from a professional in burnout for yourself. I can't stress that enough. And please, if you are finding you need immediate counselling, I really encourage to link with your a GP, a doctor, to help you with that. Here in Australia, we also have national telephone and online services, Lifeline 13114, and especially if there is any risk to yourself, if you're feeling suicidal, please contact your local emergency services, or national I should say. Here in Australia, that is 000, and also Lifeline 13114. With that in mind, please sit back, or if you're someone who listens to your pod while exercising or your commute, whatever you're doing, I hope that you find this episode enlightening and supportive in your journey and your experience with burnout. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now. Hi, and welcome to episode 35 of the pod, where I answer the question, how to stop burnout from sneaking up on you. I answer this question by sharing the research findings of Nick Petrie of the 3 degrees of burnout and how we need to respond to each level of burn in a particular way. I share my own lived experience and clinical experience along the way, hoping that by the end of the episode, you have your answer, how to stop burnout from sneaking up on you. Hi there. Really looking forward to delivering this episode to you today, where we look at the challenge of burnout sneaking up on us and how often we don't see it coming until it's too late. I just want to recognize that this is the second episode that I'm doing since I've increased the frequency of the podcast. So now I'm doing twice a month. And I'm finding so far that I'm enjoying that frequency, and so far so good on my well-being. As some of you who listened to episode 32, which was the first one, in which was the fortnightly, or not fortnightly, 2 a month rather than once a month regime, I did mention that I will continue to put my well-being first and check in how this increase in workload is going. And I enjoy doing the podcast. So I noticed that even though the workload has increased, the energy I get back from doing this kind of work is definitely something that I'm resourced and get a lot of balance and thriving from. So yeah, so far so good. Just wanted to share that with you, because I think, and this episode is going to really shed light on this too. It's always important to reflect, have that awareness, especially as we're making changes and as changes come with our load that we're taking. So yeah, so far so good. So here again. So today I want to start off by sharing the boiling frog syndrome. Now, some of you may have heard this before. I certainly have, before I came across and started niching in this area of burnout. But just in case you haven't, I will share that with you. I am going to use somebody else's words because I feel that they articulate it quite well. And this person's name is Soyash Jaju. Now, I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly, and I do apologize if they ever come across this episode. Now, it's spelled Suyashju. and the last name Jaju. I will certainly leave reference to their article in the show notes if you'd like to investigate further. Now, this was from an article they wrote on 9th of July 2019, and at the time working for McKinsey and Company. So the boiling frog syndrome is based on an urban legend describing a frog being put into boiling water and slowly boiling alive. Not very nice. The premise is simple. If a frog is suddenly put in a pot of boiling water, it will jump out to save itself from impending doom, death. But if the frog is put in lukewarm water, and with the temperature slowly rising over time, it will not perceive any danger to itself and it will be cooked to death. It gives me the heebie-jeebies. But why? Why does it do this? Since the frog is only slightly uncomfortable with its warming surroundings, it keeps trying to adjust to accustom to that gradual increase, making itself believe that slow, gradual change in temperature is normal. Only when the slow change suddenly accelerates does the frog realize it's just signed its own death warrant. It has already lost its strength to jump out of the pot. Now that got me thinking. This author didn't reflect on this from a burnout sort of side of things, but made me, as a burnout clinician, start to think about, like, this makes sense from what we understand about burnout syndrome, that it's this slow progression that often human beings respond to by thinking this is just normal, everyone goes through, it's just stress, or this is what being adult means. And we continue to push and continue to do the things that we're doing, regardless of the load. So they're in that boiling frog syndrome. We adjust, we accustom, and so with these slow increases of your emotional and mental and physical load, it just seems to be normal. This is just part of being human. This is just part of being an adult. Now I have kids, or now I don't know, have a mortgage. This is just normal. This stress load is normal. Well, this is how I'm taking it anyway. And I will be curious to hear from the viewers, the listeners, your thoughts on how this boiling frog syndrome fits with what you experience or have experienced with burnout, or if you're working with others with burnout, whether this kind of fits there with what you're witnessing as well, or hearing. So the moral of this, boiling frog syndrome, is that most of us become so comfortable and used to our current situation, that lukewarm water. And I with burnout, we get used to that chronic stress load. I'm not saying that we feel comfortable and that we feel, great about it, but we've kind of just, well, this is part of life. We just continue to adjust, like we work harder, we, push those boundaries. We take away other aspects of our life, like maybe gym or exercise or social, because all we can do is give energy to the job that pays us and looking after any dependents that we have, our children, our elderly family. So we don't recognize the need to escape from it, the need to make some big major changes to help our life work. So, we don't put up with that rising temperature. We should never settle and act sooner rather than later, basically. So I'm just going to read the last part of that article that Jaju writes, where he talks about the moral of the story, just to be really clear on this. Most of us become so comfortable and used to our current situation, so the lukewarm water, that we don't recognize the need to escape from it, the gradual increasing heat. Don't put up, his message or their message is, don't put up with the rising temperature. Never settle and act sooner rather than later. It's a message I wish I did hear, but didn't, till it was too late. But the good thing about, I think, burnout, even if we totally crash and burn, There's some significant impact. There's still things we can do to turn around, and we'll talk about that. But yeah, I feel like that boiling frog syndrome really has some crossovers with the burnout experience. I even think about that, especially when we get to the point where there's some significant impact, that it's really hard to be able to escape from it, really to be able to make some major changes. And sometimes we're not able to. We're not able to make changes if we've got dependents and there's no one else to look after them. It's on us. Or if we need to work for financial, we can't step back. That it's hard to make those adjustments that will see us to be better resourced and our well-being be okay. I still believe there's always hope, and are some adjustments that can be made, and sometimes it's within us internally rather than what can be changed on the outside. Anyway, we'll have a little bit further look into that, and hopefully that makes sense. But as I mentioned, love to hear from you around your reflections of the boiling frog syndrome and your burnout experience, or what you see in the work that you do with burnt out individuals. Okay. So as I mentioned, like this challenge of burnout sneaking up on you, often we don't see it coming until it's too late. We're that boiling frog in the pot. But we can sneak up on burnout. We can do so, by building our knowledge, our awareness around burnout. And actually makes me think of two episodes that focus on this in my podcast. One is episode 25, I think, where awareness and hope beyond burnout, where I talk more about and our understanding from a scientific but also lived experience lens of burnout. So with the idea in that episode was helping equip people with the knowledge. And also recently in episode 32, Am I Burnt Out?, where I talked more to the symptoms of burnout as well as compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma. So yeah, one of the things with us being able to sneak up on burnout is, especially in the early parts of it before it gets too bad, is having a knowledge base. I didn't have the knowledge and awareness, even though I'm a psychologist. I didn't have that wisdom around burnout. Contrary to opinions, just in case you have this, psychologists don't know everything about mental health. And so we can miss things as well. Just like any health professional, it's hard to keep up with all the developments and information. So yeah, knowledge is one of the key factors to help us be able to sneak up on burnout. I'm not going to focus on that part because there are episodes that I just mentioned that cover that. But what I want to introduce you to today comes from a gentleman called Nick Petrie, who is a leadership researcher and speaker, and has focused a lot of his work in the last several years, if not more, on burnout. And he has, from his research, done a lot, but certainly created some practical resources based off that research that, and the one I want to talk to today is called 3 Degrees of Burnout. But before we get onto that, I do want to share a little bit about Nick Petrie, because I really do think and have learnt a lot of him. I just want to share a little bit about his background and why I'm talking to his work today. Now, Nick Petrie, I'm going to refer to my notes here, holds a master's degree in Harvard University in leadership and learning, and has 2 undergraduate degrees, and is the co-author of a book called Work Without Stress, which I haven't got to read yet, but I will. He spent 10 years working and living across the globe, places like the US, Middle East, Scandinavia, Asia, Europe, and Britain. Also, he specialized in leadership development and senior executives, and helping organizations build a culture that is a healthy, high-performing culture, and one that doesn't burn people out. He also has worked across industries, so engineering, television, energy, law, banking, accounting, and construction. So quite diverse there. I do notice and intrigued if he does intend to sort of look at the health industry. That would be really cool. Just, obviously I'm biased and wanting that from being in the health industry. The last 2 years, he has led a global research project on how people in the workplace best balance the need to perform, grow, and not burn out. And a major focus of his work now is sharing the insights, tools, and practices that come from that research with people in workplaces. So he's down there on the ground talking to people who have burnt out or hasn't burnt out. So learning from both angles. Why do some people in workplaces burn out and others don't? And he does webinars to distribute this information. Now, I can't remember how I discovered Nick Petrie's work, but probably I follow hashtags and follow accounts, so it's probably come up in my social media feed somewhere. But I started attending his webinars, started reading his blogs, subscribed to his website to gather my knowledge and understanding through his research about burnout, so I can help others as well. So I can highly recommend. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the things to come out of Nick Petrie's work is the 3 degrees of burnout. Now, I'm going to rely a bit on my notes here. In his research of the people in workplaces who burn out, him and his team discovered that burnout was progressive and not one day you're fine and next you're burnt out. So definitely that frog syndrome. It's a slow progressing condition. And the stories that he heard resembled these 3 degrees of burnout. So that's where it's come from. So the first degree of burnout is a heavy period of stress, feelings of overwhelm, but the person in this first degree of burnout continues to function effectively. Now, reflecting on my own experience of burnout, I'd have to say, I can't even really say for sure, to be honest, that because I don't know if I was ever really effectively functioning. But I'd say maybe and I'm talking about early career psychology, I think I was already experiencing first degree burnout throughout my postgraduate degree, where, and anyone who I think has done a postgraduate degree where you've got the practical aspects as well as the theoretical assignments, thesis, as well as earning a living, keeping relationships up. But I'd say, it was probably around a first degree burn throughout my university studies, most definitely. I actually took a year off studies in between my undergraduate honours degree to my postgraduate, and chose to do my postgraduate part-time to help manage, adjust. Sorry about that. So I took a year off in between my undergraduate and honours degree and postgraduate, and chose to do my postgraduate part-time to help my functioning. So I think that definitely helped, but I do believe I was probably first degree. So it was definitely a heavy period of stress. There was definitely feelings of overwhelm at times here and there throughout my postgrad, but I was still able to function quite effectively. Second degree burn. So what they found, Nick Petrie and his team, that here people were experiencing chronic stress. So it wasn't just a heavy period of stress, so what we often call an acute stress period, but this was now chronic. Now, in terms of defining that, I'm not quite sure, but I sort of draw on chronic illness literature here, and from a health perspective, things are considered a chronic condition if the condition's been occurring, I think, for 3 months or longer, I think is now. It used to be, when I first got trained in this area, sort of 6 months or longer. I do believe now it's 3 months or longer. Anyway, that's just my thoughts on it. So chronic stress, though, second degree burn, chronic stress, feelings of fatigue. along with decreased motivation and effectiveness. So your work now is, definitely being affected and moving into more survival mode. So you just, I think everyone can, certainly have been there, can relate to that. You're just going through the motions, you're just doing what you can. There's no sort of being able to take on anymore, or if you do, it's like you're sinking. So, I encourage you to take a moment to reflect on that, second degree burnout and what you're hearing and how that might relate to you and your experiences or relate to people that you work with. As I reflect on mine, I think things were definitely second degree. I would have to say in the last private practice I was working from, and I'd been there for 5 years, I think that I was waking up tired pretty much all the time. The chronic stress had set in, my motivation was low, and my effectiveness was definitely impacted, and I was just in survival mode. I would say, I'm guessing here because it was a while ago now, but I'd say at least a good year, maybe, before I completely left my role. So it was a chronic, stress load. And I think it started with COVID-19 hitting, and uh, and just the impacts and changes that had immediately on my work, but also on my regime of care. So things changed, in terms of being able to go to gym, which was a big part of my well-being, being able to go on regular holidays, and also the increases of impact on the industry. And for me, being such a forward mind thinker, and I already had a full caseload, and I had the awareness that people, even if they weren't in need now and were doing well now, which in the first year or so was the case, even the clients on my books, most were doing well and not requiring more. Some were, but we weren't getting influx of referrals till probably, I can't remember when, but at some point. But I had this awareness that we're going to be in a mental health crisis, which we are, and it did come. But I had that awareness already, and it was already increasing my stress in the present, and it was really hard to put that aside. So yeah, I'd say I was in that second degree burn, in 2020 at some point, maybe even earlier. But yeah, I hope that you've reflected on that yourself. And the last one, so the third degree burn that Petrie and the researchers found was that, so this was a full experience of burnout. So mind and body start to shut down, simple tasks become unmanageable, emotions become unpredictable and hard to control. Now, this was probably, for me, happening about a couple of months, maybe a few months or more before I could not work anymore. I was definitely crying a lot, and it was uncontrollable, usually at home. But there were some sessions that I couldn't recover from as best as I usually could. And I must admit, there was one session that with a client where I couldn't control my emotions, and not in the sense of, sometimes as psychs, we're human, your client is sharing something and you have a cry, with them. And I don't see anything wrong with that. But this was, yeah, definitely, I won't go into details of something I received supervision around, but it was not okay. And there, that was probably a couple of months before I stopped working. But yeah, so controllable emotions. Definitely, I couldn't read, I couldn't focus. Sessions, sometimes I wouldn't be quite present with my client. I couldn't, I was definitely withdrawing from social. I was definitely irritable at home with my husband, doing housework. I think that left the station quite a long time before. I didn't have the energy capacities to do things. The mind was foggy. Every day I was tired. and just had escapist fantasies, you know, wanting to get out of here. And certainly in my head, you know, can I quit? Can I reduce? And working with my supervisor to try to make some changes, try to get out of that pot, so to say, but the energy to do that. And I remember I went for an interview because one of my ideas was I'd diversify within my profession. So move out of doing the one-on-one work all the time, like maybe 2 days a week. So reduce my caseload and do other days, you know, either teaching or some other work where it's not one-on-one. And I went for a job where it would be more group work. And just throughout that process, and I almost got that job, but it was actually a little bit dodgy on the part of the people that I went for a job with. They advertised it as a group therapist, you know, you'd be doing group work. But when the contract came to me, they said I got the job, I just need to sign the contract. It was basically one-on-one work or whatever work that they wanted you to do. And so obviously I wasn't going to sign that contract. It's not what I signed up for. And when I brought that up with the employer, they just said, well, it's that or nothing. So false advertisement there. But anyway, I was trying to, and I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back, because that was across the Christmas period. And I, you know, took Christmas off, you know, 2 weeks, came back and lasted another, I think, month and a half. And then the tragic day came where I just could not go to work anymore. So 3rd-degree burn. And that one I recognized quite well, the 3rd-degree burn. But like I mentioned earlier, with that frog syndrome, the boiling frog syndrome, it did feel like it sort of, all of a sudden I was in this boiling water. But in retrospect, as you've just heard, there was 1st, 2nd, and 3rd-degree burn. So yeah, I do see a lot of value in Nick Petrie's resource there on building that awareness around those degrees of burn, and share that with you today as a way for you to be able to reflect on where you're at in your degrees of burn, or the people that you're working with. And again, would be eager to hear your thoughts on that application, on that resource, and whether that is useful as well for you. And I will leave details of Nick Petrie's blog where he talks to this, writes to this, in the show notes. Hi, it's just me. I hope you don't mind this very brief interruption to this episode that you're tuning into. I just wanted to let you know about a free resource that I have to help support your well-being at work. It's called the Build Your Wellbeing at Work workbook, where I share 5 key practices that you can implement every day to help prevent or even recover and grow from burnout. So on my shared screen there, you can see my website, which is www.burnoutspsychologysupport.com. You scroll down to the bottom of the page and you just enter your details there, first and last name and email, which then will subscribe you to the Burnout Psychology Support newsletter. So you'll be first to be informed of things going on in the services I provide, but you'll score yourself that free workbook. So thank you very much for allowing me to come in, drop in, but now back to your episode. Take care of you. Bye for now. What I'd like to share now with you to, you know, help with this challenge of burnout sneaks up on us, and that, you know, the answer, let's sneak up on burnout, by using Nick Petrie's 3 degrees of burnout. I want to share with you what Nick Petrie and his team has found in terms of how to respond to each of those different degrees of burnout. Because what they've found is that if we don't respond to the different burns appropriately, just like, you know, for any doctors out there that work in burns units, I'm sure there's different, not a health specialist doctor, but they use different degrees of burns and what treatment we need for each of those. Same with this. So I want to share with you the wisdom they've gained from working with workplaces and the employees in this area. So with the 1st degree burn, rest and recover is the theme. So things like self-care activities, taking more breaks, so actually taking that lunch, or maybe taking a long weekend, avoiding working in the evenings, or whatever that looks like. It might be overtime, taking overtime, because you might be a shift worker, or it might be changing your shifts from, doing evenings if you're noticing that's having a load on you, to doing day shifts if possible, negotiating that with your employer. I've worked with people that have done that who are shift workers. So depending on the field you're working in, and what impact those shifts are having on you, trying to make adjustments there, or not doing the overtime, saying no to that. So making adjustments there in your work. Finding activities to recharge. So recharging activities, it might be yoga, it might be exercise, it might be gardening for you, and taking vacations to replenish that, that energy, so you're able to return and keep working as well. So that's the rest and recover. And what Nick Petrie talks to, and I've seen this as well, that a lot of workplaces, in their wisdom of helping the well-being of their employees, are doing these kind of things, but they might be applying it, or are applying it, to the second and third degree burns as well, which is not great. So this is the first degree burn. This is where we've had an acute period of heavy stress, feelings of overwhelm, but outcome of work is still that able to work effectively. So this is where the rest and recover aspects are really important. And I think these are the things that need to be in our lifestyle, need to actually be there. And I must admit, like, I'm not burnt out anymore, but these are things that I do constantly. Rest and recover is part of my lifestyle now, so I don't get to those second and third degree burns. So I feel like these first degree burnout sort of line of defense needs to be part of our lifestyle. Just my thoughts on that. So second degree burn. So just to recap, this is the chronic stress, feelings of fatigue constantly, along with that decreased motivation and effectiveness in our ability to work. We're in that survival mode. We're not able to do much more. So here, the focus is on changes to work and mindset. So what they mean by this is establishing firm boundaries, learn to separate our identity from work, saying no more often, like no to that overtime, prioritize and protect time for those activities and hobbies outside of work, and checking for values alignment with your current role and career. And maybe a use of a coach, a burnout coach, to help support you in making these changes and new habits. So yeah. So imagine if, you're attending something that's more of a first degree rest and recover kind of response, self-care and things, when you are someone who's experiencing those second degree burns, chronic stress, fatigue, low motivation, those kind of things, and where there's more work needed to be done on boundary setting and looking at values, your values, and how they're aligned or not aligned with your work and career. And being able to prioritize. A lot of us have difficulty, including I did, in prioritizing myself. So that first line of defense with degrees of burnout, if we have some boundary issues, we have prioritizing issues with our own self and taking care of ourselves, then we need the second degree burnout approach, second degree burn approach to burnout. And let's move to the third degree burnout. And this is the one that I needed to do, because by the time I got to the point where I started to, when I got to this is what I need to do. The theme here is deep life changes. And I think even if I was able to get to my burnout, and I think in a way I did, across the time, able to adjust with the first and second degree burnout. I think the third degree burnout didn't happen for me sooner, because I had, some of these things in place, was doing some of this work, but inevitably I felt like I would get to the third degree. And I think a lot of people would, because there was deep life changes to make, and I hadn't made those changes yet. So I feel, and this is my thoughts, I would have got there anyway. But anyway, let's look at Petrie's work. So in this third degree of burnout, so this is the full experience of burnout. Our mind and body shut down. Simple tasks become impossible. We may not be able to work. Our emotions are hard to control. So we're all over the place. We're chaotic. So this is where we need deep life changes. So here the recommendation is stop work for an extended period of time and work with a counselor or therapist, deeply examining your self-talk, your belief systems, your values. Consider maybe changing your job, company, or career temporarily or permanently. Rest is necessary, but it isn't sufficient. I'll talk to that in a second. There must be true change or the burnout pattern will repeat. That's why I think I would have repeated, I would have gotten burnout if I didn't make these deep life changes. And this path, though, yeah, even though this path is, then they acknowledge, one of the hardest to do, and it's arduous and it's not linear. It's like a roller coaster, but eventually, and it's a roller coaster that eventually feels fun, not to start with. But it often leads to what he calls post-traumatic growth. So it leads to growth from that trauma of burnout and a happier, more aligned career and life. So it has the rewards. So yeah, I want you to reflect on that. You know, if you're someone, again, who's experiencing burnout or working with people with burnout, just how that sort of sits or doesn't, you know, just reflecting on that as I reflect on mine. And yeah, I can definitely identify with the stage. And I didn't know at the time that this is what, you know, scientifically we know is good to do. But I intuitively knew that if I didn't do the work, that I'll be back here, back in the burnout, I mean, again. And it was no longer a sacrifice I could make because it was affecting others. And I've seen this in people I work with who've reached third degree as well, that often the motivating factor for them to do the deeper work and come see me is that it's had an impact on, you know, their parenting or their ability to earn a living and be able to provide for their home, their family. It's impacted their marriages. It's impacted their sense of self and their identity, or their clients, of course. You know, the people they serve, and so it almost like the third degree burn can catapult that frog, so to say, to be able to connect with the services that can help them get the energy to get the hell out of that pot, and creating a new pot, a new environment that doesn't have the boiling water, or so working with a therapist, working with the counselor who can do that deep work. And that's what I did. And now do for others. I had to overhaul my self-talk, did a lot of work around self-compassion and self-acceptance. I had to work around my belief systems, in terms of, you know, you can't let down other people. You're responsible to help other people. You know, your only worth is being able to help others. You know, you just got to do more to be successful. There's a lot of unhealthy beliefs that I had to work through, and also really be able to connect with my values. Like, what is it that I really stand for? What is important in my life? How I want to be towards myself and others, and come from a valued driven action place rather than striving for what I thought was meaningful or important or purposeful, that was often based on some sort of cultural learned belief around what that looks like. Like for me, it was, oh, your value was in caring for others. Now I don't, my worth is not based on that. My value is not based on that. My value is not based on anything, actually, but but more that what lights me up, what do I find rich and meaningful and purposeful, and aligning my actions in my career and life based on that. And often I find from that place that, you know, I can still help others because that's still a passion of mine, but I do it from a place in which it comes from what lifts me, not what I think I should do, and for value or worth. My identity is now separated from work. So anyway, I have done that deeper work, which took a long time. And I also, as Nick Petrie and his team has noticed, that I took an extended leave from my work so I could do that work, because I knew with my 3rd degree burn, and I didn't know that that's what it was called at the time, but it definitely was. I didn't have the energy. I was that frog in the boiling water to be able to do that while working. So I stepped away from the career. I did work in other areas. I did some dog walking for a time because I needed to earn money. Although that didn't earn much, but it certainly gave back to me. And then I worked as a teacher part-time for a while, helping other people become counselors. And it was challenging work, but it wasn't emotionally loaded work. So it used a different energy. So that was good. And it was part-time. So yeah, like I stepped away, and I think it was a good 2 years before I came back to the field, which, and very differently in terms of how I work now. But anyway, the deep work. So there's a long reflection there. But yeah, I hope that, yeah, just taking that time to reflect yourself on that 3rd degree burn, and how, if that makes sense to you, and what your thoughts, feelings are on that. And again, open to hear about what's coming up for you in this as well. So always feel free to have a look in the show notes on how to get in contact with me, and share that with me if you'd like to. But yeah, so in summary, you know, today we've looked at, okay, burnout sneaks up on us, and that's a challenge. But how can we meet that challenge? Well, the answer's here. And, you know, okay, we can sneak up on burnout, and we can do that by building our knowledge and awareness of what burnout is. So episode 25 and 32 can help you with that if you need, and notice that there's a gap there. But also building our self-awareness by using Nick Petrie and his team's resource of the degrees of burnout. So that 1st, 2nd, 3rd degree of burnout, and then applying the answer of what resources and strategies and work that we need to do for that degree of burnout, so we can nip that burnout in the butt, so to say, and stop it from, if you're 1st degree burn, stop it from getting to that place of the 2nd or 3rd. Or, you know, if you're at the 3rd, you know, certainly stopping it from coming back again. Because burnout is cyclic, a bit like people who've experienced episodic depression. We are more at risk of experiencing another episode depression, often because the things we needed to do, the work we needed to do, we haven't done yet, and it comes back. So yeah, burnout is like that as well. It's cyclic. We can experience another episode. And I also think just another thing is I've learned in applying and reflecting on Nick Petrie's, you know, degrees of burnout and what to do so we can sneak up on burnout, is that I also feel, even if you are in a 1st degree of burnout and you recognize the potential for 2nd or 3rd, because you recognize that you struggle with boundaries, or your self-talk is quite negative, you know, you have difficulty being compassionate to yourself. Maybe you hold some of those self-sacrificing belief systems, perfectionism, which are all causes of burnout, contributors of burnout. Go back to my episode 25 for finding those out. Do that work. You know, do that work now, like do the deep work, and you probably can do the deep work while working, so it doesn't get to that 3rd degree. That's something I'm not sure if Nick and his team has sort of gone into, but as a practitioner in the area and a person with lived experience, that would be my thoughts on it as well, that I'd love to share with you, and you know, certainly getting your feedback on that as well. But that brings me to the close of this episode today. I hope that you have gained some insight into some help there of, you know, you know, meeting this challenge of burnout sneaking up on you, and how we can sneak up on it. Thank you so much for joining with me today, and take care of you. Bye for now. Me again. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this episode of When Burnout Becomes Reality podcast. I do hope that you have gained some insight, wisdom, or taking away something from this episode that is helpful for you with wherever you're at in your burnout journey, or helping others with. Please also reach out. I'd love to hear from the listeners, the viewers, to find out what you're finding helpful, maybe what you still would like to know. So please don't hesitate to follow, subscribe, comment, review, like, shoot me an email. I have my details in the show notes. And if you are in need of services around burnout and you are an Australian citizen, I, in my business, Burnout Psychology Support, do offer group and individual services, telehealth, as well as in-person in Brisbane. So again, check out the show notes. I have my contact details, but the best thing to do is jump on my website at www.burnoutspsychologysupport.com. And just a reminder, of course, to reach out for personalized help. This podcast, whilst we strive to deliver information that can be supportive and educational for you, it is not tailored to meet your personal needs. And burnout is very individualized in terms of what gets us into burnout and what helps support us in getting out. So please do seek professional support. And I think that is it for me to share with you. Thank you once again, and take care of you. Bye for now.